In this video, you will learn how to perform polynomial long division. Now, when you are dividing polynomials, the process is exactly the same as when you divide regular numbers. So I'm going to review with you how to divide with regular numbers using the long division process. So here we see 837 divided by 6. When you divide, you can set it up like this, and you see how many times this number 6 goes into 8. Well, that would be one time, so we put a 1 up on the top. And then we multiply 1 by whatever's over here, so 1 times 6, that would give me 6. And then I subtract to get 2, and then bring down the 3, and repeat the process. And then I see how many times 6 goes into 23, which would be 3 times. I then multiply again, 3 times 6 to get 18. I subtract, and I get 5. I bring down the 7, and I repeat again. So 6 goes into 57 9 times, and then I multiply. 9 times 6 is 54, subtract, and we get 3. And now the remainder of 3 we can write as a fraction. We can write as 3 over 6, which can reduce to become 1 over 2. So my solution is 139 and 1 over 2. Now looking at polynomial division. Let's say we had x squared minus 4x minus 12 over x plus 2. Now this looks much more complicated, but the process is exactly the same as we did over here with actual numbers. So if we had to divide, we can set it up like this. And just like the first step over here was to see how many times the 6 goes into 8, we see how many times does the x go into x squared. So what times x gives me x squared? Well, that's going to be an x. X times x is x squared. So from here, with the long division, once we had the 1, we multiplied the 1 by 6 to get the 6. Same thing here. We take the x and multiply it by the entire thing of x plus 2 to get something down here. So x times x plus 2 would give me x times x, which is x squared, and then x times 2, which is 2x. Now your next step with long division was to subtract and get a number down here. Same thing, we're going to subtract, and we are subtracting this entire quantity. So when if someone makes a mistake with the long division process, typically speaking, it's going to be with the subtraction. So be careful because you're doing negative 3x minus the 2x as well. So negative 3x minus 2x would give me negative 5x. And the x squareds would cancel, right? X squared minus x squared is 0. So then your next step is to bring down the negative 10, just like we did over here. So we now have negative 5x minus 10. And now we repeat the process. We see how many times x goes into negative 5x. So what times x gives me negative 5x? That is going to be negative 5. And then from here, I multiplied negative 5 by this entire quantity of x plus 2. So negative 5 times x is negative 5x, and negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. And then from here, I need to subtract. So be careful with all of the negatives. All right, we're subtracting this entire thing. So we have negative 5x minus a negative 5x, which would give me 0. And then negative 10 minus a negative 10, that's the same thing as plus 10. So negative 10 plus 10 would give me 0 as well. So this answer would be x minus 5 with no remainder. If there were a remainder, we would write this number and put it over the x plus 2. So let's say the remainder were a 2, we would write a 2 over x plus 2 at the end of my answer. Here in example 2, we are told to divide 5x minus 6 plus 25x squared by 5x minus 3. Now when you begin your division, you're going to want to rearrange our terms so that they're in descending order. So meaning, if you look here at the numerator, notice the x squared term is not first. We have the x to the first power term first. So it's going to be best if we rearrange this. So let's put the 25x squared first. The degree of that is 2. And then 5x would come second. So 5x to the first power. And then minus 6 comes after that. So we want our exponents to be decreasing. So second power, first power, and then no exponents. This is a constant. All right, and then we divide that by 5x minus 3. All right, so make sure you rearrange first, and then from here, we can begin our division process. So to begin, we want to see how many times does 5x go into 25x squared? Or in other words, what times 5x gives us 25x squared? Well, 5 times 5 would give 25, and then x times x would give you x squared. So up here in the top, we're going to write 5x. And then step 2 is we take the 5x and multiply it by 5x minus 3. So when you multiply, make sure you multiply by the entire binomial. So 5x times 5x would be 25x squared, and 5x times negative 3 is negative 15x. So that's going to go right here. Now the next step is probably the most common mistake in this entire process, and that is with the subtraction. When you subtract, make sure that you're subtracting both terms. So we have 25x squared minus 25x squared, which would cancel out. But then don't forget, we have 5x minus a negative 15x. That is where the mistake is most often made. 5x minus a negative 15x minus a negative makes a plus. So we have 5x plus 15x, which gives 20x. So 20x is what goes right here. And then we can bring down this negative 6 and then begin the process all over again. So now we start back with step 1, where we see how many times does 5x go into 20x. Or in other words, what times 5x gives 20x. Well, that's going to be 4, because 4 times 5x is 20x. Now for step 2, we want to take the 4 and multiply it by both terms over here. So 4 times 5x is 20x, and 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. So we have 20x minus 12. And then from here, the next step is we want to subtract. Now again, make sure that we are subtracting this entire quantity. We're subtracting 20x minus 20x, which would cancel. But don't forget, we're also subtracting negative 6 minus a negative 12, which becomes a plus 12. So negative 6 plus 12 would be a positive 6. So this 6 right here is our remainder, because we have used all the terms up here in the top. So this is our remainder. The remainder you can write as a fraction. So we have a plus, and we put the 6 over what we're dividing by, which is 5x minus 3. So our final answer is 5x plus 4 plus 6 over 5x minus 3. Here we have 3y to the third power plus 2 divided by y minus 2. Now I'm showing you this one because there is something you need to be aware of. When you're setting this one up, all right, when you're creating your long division problem, notice how we do not have any y squared terms or y to the first power terms. It just jumps from y to the third and then the number, plus 2. Well, you need to put in zeros for the parts that are missing. So we're missing a y squared, so put a 0 in for y squared. We're missing y to the first power, so put 0 y to the first powers. And then we put plus 2. And then that's divided by y minus 2. If you do not do that, you will notice pretty quickly once you begin that things are not lining up. You're going to get subtracting, and you're going to get subtraction of things that are not like terms. And so you'll see pretty quickly that you've done something wrong. And if you notice that, you probably forgot the zeros for these missing parts. All right, so this would be your initial setup. And we see that typed up right here. So we can begin. We ask ourselves, what times y gives me 3y to the third power? And that's going to be 3y squared. 3y squared times y gives me 3y to the third power. Now your next step is to multiply 3y squared by the entire quantity of y minus 2. So we have 3y squared times y, which is 3y to the third power, and 3y squared times negative 2 is negative 6y squared. And then from here I need to subtract. So I'm subtracting this entire quantity. So 3y to the third minus 3y to the third would cancel. 0y squared minus a negative 6y squared. Minus a negative becomes a plus. So we have a positive 6y squared. And then I need to bring down this 0y. Now we have 6y squared plus 0y. Now we can repeat the process and see how many times y goes into 6y squared. And that's going to be 6y, because 6y times y is 6y squared. Now the next step is to take that 6y and multiply it by the entire quantity of y minus 2. So 6y times y is 6y squared. 6y times negative 2 is negative 12y. And then your next step is to subtract that entire quantity. So we have 6y squared minus 6y squared. That will cancel. 0y minus a negative 12 would become a plus 12y. So we have 12y here. We need to bring down this last number, the 2, to get 12y plus 2. I repeat the process one more time, and I see how many times does y go into 12y. And that's going to be 12. 12 times y is 12y. And then I take 12 times the entire quantity of y minus 2, and that's going to give me 12y minus 24. I then can subtract, and we are subtracting this entire thing. So 12y minus 12y will cancel. 2 minus negative 24 would be a positive 26. So my remainder is 26, which I can write as a fraction. So plus 26 over the y minus 2. So my solution, when I divide those two polynomials, is 3y squared plus 6y plus 12 plus 26 over y minus 2. Let's take a look at one more example. Here in example 4, this one is a little bit different because our denominator has 3 terms instead of 2 terms. However, the process is still exactly the same. Now, look at the numerator. We go from the 4th power, we skip the 3rd power, and then go to the 2nd power, 1st power, and the constant. So what we need to do is actually put in a placeholder for the x to the 3rd power. So when you set this up, you're going to need to put in a 0x to the 3rd. So your setup is going to look like this. We have 2x to the 4th plus 0x cubed minus 4x squared plus 8x minus 5, all divided by the x squared plus x minus 3. Okay, we need that 0 in there because if we did not have that, then when we multiply after we find our term up here at the top, then it's not going to simplify correctly. And you notice that right here after this first step. All right, so to begin, we want to see what number or what value would multiply with x squared to get this first term of 2x to the 4th power. So what times x squared gives you 2x to the 4th power? That would be 2x squared. All right, and then once you have that, you then multiply this 2x squared times this entire quantity of x squared plus x minus 3. So 2x squared times x squared would be 2x to the 4th power. 2x squared times x is 2x cubed, and 2x squared times negative 3 would be negative 6x squared. So that would be right here. And then your next step is to subtract. So when you subtract, remember you're subtracting everything. So you're subtracting a 2x to the 4th power, which would cancel out to get 0. 0x cubed minus 2x cubed would be negative 2x cubed. And then negative 4x squared minus a negative 6x squared. The minus of the negative makes a plus 6x squared. When you add 6x squared to negative 4x squared, that gives you a positive 2x squared. So notice the 0 was necessary because if we did not have the 0x cubed, when we try to subtract, they would not have like terms. It would not simplify correctly. All right, so now from here, we need to bring down this 8x and then repeat the process. So now we ask ourselves, what number or what value would multiply with x squared, this first term, to get negative 2x cubed? Well, that's going to be negative 2x. All right, because negative 2x times x squared would be negative 2x cubed. And the next step requires you to multiply negative 2x by all three terms, the x squared plus x and the minus 3. When you do that, you're going to get negative 2x cubed. Negative 2x times x is negative 2x squared. And negative 2x times negative 3 gives you a positive 6x. And then from here, we subtract. So remember, we're subtracting everything. So negative 2x cubed minus a negative 2x cubed, that becomes a plus, which would cancel. And then 2x squared minus a negative 2x squared. So minus the negative, again, would make a plus. So 2x squared plus 2x squared, that would give you 4x squared. And then 8x minus the 6x would give you 2x. So now we have 4x squared plus 2x. And now to finish off, we bring down this negative 5 and then repeat the process one more time. So now we ask ourselves, what value multiplies with x squared to get 4x squared? And that's going to be a positive 4. And then you multiply the 4 by the x squared, the plus x, and the minus 3 to get 4x squared plus 4x minus 12. And then you subtract. Remember, you're subtracting everything. So 4x squared minus 4x squared, that would cancel. 2x minus 4x would be negative 2x. And then negative 5 minus a negative 12 becomes a plus 12. And negative 5 plus 12 would be a positive 7. So this negative 2x plus 7, that is our remainder. And we write that as a fraction. So we write that over the x squared plus x minus 3. So your final answer, when you divide these two polynomials, is 2x squared minus 2x plus 4 plus a negative 2x plus 7 over x squared plus x minus 3.